Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I'm a criminal psychologist and I've done a number of these videos before where I do a psychological analysis of an offender and I draw on previously known research findings to create that profile. I am just giving an informed opinion about what the psychology behind this offender is. It isn't a diagnosis of any kind. In this particular video, I'm going to be taking a look at Ian Watkins. Many thanks to Frederick Nietzsche, I hope I've pronounced that properly, for suggesting this case for analysis today. In all of my videos, I always try to talk more about the psychology of the behaviour. However, it is sometimes necessary to include some details. Therefore, this video contains some details of sexual assault and rape of young babies and very young children. As always, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the case and the offender, then talking about the upbringing and childhood of the offender, because this can sometimes shed a little bit light onto previous traumatic events that may have caused some psychological dysfunction. Then I'll discuss some of the behaviours during the crime that reveal psychological aspects of the offender. If you do want to learn more about the psychology of crime, criminal behaviour and offender profiling, there are a range of courses available online via my website, and there is a link to that in the video description below. Some of these are free, some of them are paid. They all come with certificates and a money-back guarantee. Ian Watkins is a convicted sex offender from Wales. In 2013, he was sentenced to 29 years imprisonment for multiple sexual offences, including the sexual assault of young babies and children. On the 19th of December 2012, Watkins was charged at Cardiff Magistrates Court with conspiracy to engage in sexual activity with a 1-year-old girl and possession and or distribution of indecent images and extreme animal pornography. He was remanded in custody, as were his 2 female co-accused offenders. Ian Watkins was born in Merthyr Tydfil and was later brought up in Pontypridd. His natural father died when he was 5 years old and his mother married again 3 years later. The family say that Watkins was never pressured into being religious but was quietly encouraged in that. At school and at work he had a passion for singing. As a young boy he practised musical instruments in his parents' garage with his friends. The devastated parents have spoken out at their horror of their son's crimes against children. Watkins' mum, Elaine, aged 60, and her husband, John Davies, who's 53, say that they're really struggling to understand what turned their son from a straight-A pupil who was raised in Pontypridd into a paedophile whose dark sexual desires knew almost no boundaries. He was good friends at school with a man named Michael Lewis, and he said, "We were in the same year at school and we hung out all the way through." Their love for heavy metal and rock music bonded the two. And this love of music provided Watkins with a belief that one day he would be in a band. In his mid-teens in 1991, he got that chance when he and Mike got together and formed a group. The band has sold 3.5 million albums around the world and has had a UK #1 album with Liberation Transmission. He was famous for claiming to shun drink and drugs even when his band hit stardom. But in court it was revealed that he'd become a determined and committed paedophile who also wanted to give children crack cocaine. It seems as though his early life is really quite quiet and stable. It's only when he began to gain fame and notoriety that he began to use drugs and became obsessed with sexual fantasies. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case is that he could have been stopped much sooner had the police acted differently in this case. An ex-girlfriend of his, Joanna Magic, reported to the police that Watkins in 2008 had revealed to her that he wanted to abuse children. But at that stage, he's possibly looking for validation for these fantasies that he was having. She'd originally worked as an escort and Watkins was one of her clients. However, following his revelations about that, she no longer wanted to be his girlfriend, but she remained in contact with him as an escort to gather as much information and evidence as she could. Joanna had reported to South Wales Police that he was a danger to children. She said in an interview, "I couldn't believe how indifferent the police were. It was like they were taking his side and dismissing me as some stalker." She also said, "I told Ian that I'd gone to the police and we argued, but he was so cocky he didn't think the police would touch him, and he was right." This suggests to me that he had very narcissistic traits. He saw his own gratification as being the most important thing to him. The feeling that the police wouldn't arrest him is also fairly narcissistic. Narcissists believe that they are far superior and way more intelligent than anybody who's around them at the time. Joanna told the Daily Mirror that Watkins would boast to her how he used his fame and glamour to prey on impressionable young fans that he had. She also revealed how he'd enjoyed turning these fans into what he called super fans. And these were women prepared to offer their own children up for sex. We know that 2 women had been in this position and were found guilty of abusing their own children. Initially, Watkins denied being a paedophile and he expressed exacerbation at the way people had reacted to his guilty pleas. Details of a telephone conversation were recorded of him saying, "I'm going to put out a statement on the 18th just to say it was mega lols," meaning laugh out loud. I don't know what everybody's getting so freaked out about. Watkins said in the conversation that he'd been faced with a choice before pleading guilty. He'd said, "It was either I go up there and say, 'Come on, it's not that bad. Nobody got hurt,' or try to win them over with my charm." And he ended saying, "I was off my head and didn't remember anything anyway." It's also reported that in a second conversation that was recorded, he said that what he had said in online conversations was chat that he did to shock people when he was off his head. From a psychological point of view, he is, by this statement, trying to minimise his offences. What he's saying is that he wasn't responsible because he was high on drugs at the time. He tries to claim that it wasn't that bad. The subtext to this is that he's having a laugh and nobody is getting seriously hurt by this. All of these are fairly narcissistic traits. On the 26th of November, Watkins pleaded guilty to attempted rape and sexual assault of a child under 13, but not guilty to rape. And this was accepted by the prosecution. He further pleaded guilty to 3 counts of sexual assault involving children, 6 counts of taking, making or possessing indecent images of children, and 1 count of possessing an extreme pornographic image involving a sex act on an animal. His victims included a baby boy, and he sent a text message to the mother of that victim and said, "You belong to me, so does your baby." That statement is all about power and control. I think that this underlines everything about his offending. He came from a fairly stable background and there was nothing really there to suggest that there were any kind of events that could be a trigger. He publicly shunned drink and drugs in his earlier years of fame. However, he did go on to use these later in his career. It seems to me as though this transition from being a quiet Welsh boy to gaining international stardom, who had thousands of fans, became a catechist for his need for more attention. He evolved into a position where women and young girls would do anything for him, and he exploited that. He used charm and manipulation to convince them that they should do anything for him. Again, that's a fairly narcissistic trait. It was said in court that he developed an obsession for filming himself having sex and became addicted to drugs at the age of 30. His barrister had said that Watkins had no memory of the crime involving one woman and her son, where he admitted to the attempt of the rape of a baby. 2 female co-defendants also admitted a string of sex abuse charges against their own children. One of them discussed with Watkins a summer of incest and child porn, and they discussed whoring out, as they put it, that child, as well as giving it crack cocaine. He had reportedly groomed a 2-year-old little girl's mum from behind bars. He's believed to have been writing to the 21-year-old woman who's been a fan of his since she was 16. She has visited him at the high security Wakefield prison, and he has told her that he loves her and has asked her to wear an engagement ring, according to an article in The Sun. He joked with her about having her toddler seeing them have sex. That was a very arrogant thing to do. He must have felt absolutely untouchable on some level. Again, that's a fairly narcissistic trait, and he believes that he is better and more worthy than others surrounding him. That woman has reportedly said to a friend that she would never let Watkins near her daughter, but regardless, her child has been taken into care and her mobile phone and laptop have been. Following his trial, an independent police complaints commission conducted a review of the case and found that the police had failed a number of times between 2008 and 2012 to act on Watkins being reported for his behaviour. That report quoted a detective who said that Watkins had a number of fans and ex-girlfriends making allegations that when these were investigated were found to be false. In conclusion, then, Ian Watkins is one of these rare cases where there isn't really any clear trigger or any known traumatic event that could have acted as a trigger for his offending. He grew a large following of fans and he really enjoyed the attention being lavished upon him. He started to use drugs and began to explore with his own sexuality, which included being sexually deviant. These fantasies grew and evolved over time, as did his enjoyment of being in a position of notoriety. He developed an enjoyment of being able to convince women to do what he wanted them to do. He learned to use his charm and manipulation in deviant ways. This, combined with the drug addiction and a growing lack of inhibitions, led to some of the most horrific crimes. I hope that you found this analysis of Ian Watkins interesting. More importantly, I hope that you've learned something new from it. Thanks for watching then. Bye for now.